We appreciate your time. We actually have our investigative reporter, Nate Morabito, who's done some digging. And Nate, as you know, we're in this coverage of Helene during this month. Things will really ramp up as we get closer to the anniversary in the next 2 weeks here. But I know you've done some digging, especially on the FEMA side of things. And just because you've sent me some of the stuff that you've worked on, it is interesting to see the damage still. I went up to Boone maybe a week ago. And still see the damage in certain areas. The banks, one area Pierre and I saw, there was a number of about 10 to 12 homes. And in one area, they were still disconnected from the main road because the bridge was washed out. Now, they had another way to go, but other folks had built just like a makeshift driveway to other properties to get around this driveway. So it's interesting, we're nearing a year and there's so much still to be done, kind of reminiscent of what I saw when Katrina happened. And that was a totally different devastation and totally different situation. But I know you've been digging in. Set the preface for us here, what you actually were looking at. And I know individuals, in Western North Carolina, we've been reporting, have been waiting on this money. So let's talk about, what you've been digging into.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about FEMA, we're talking about federal government money as well. But
okay.
What you just described, Colin, it's wild to me because I went to Buncombe County a few weeks ago and visited a community in the same situation. And in fact, I don't know if we can just pull the sound up real quick, but from Michelle Pentecost, this is a woman who lives up in Buncombe County, and for the better part of almost a year, they have essentially been having to drive over this bridge that is not meant for heavy traffic. It's on a neighbor's property. And they're having to cut through several other neighbors' properties to even get to their side of the creek. And the way you put it too is amazing, because I went up there and you see these properties and a hurricane came through, floodwaters, a landslide came through there. But what you also don't fully get is the way the land used to look, just the undulation in the land, how it shifted it, the way the creek used to be. It's now much wider. What property used to be there before, and so it's kind of like you almost expect from the outside looking in it to be some black and white picture of what devastation is supposed to look like. And what I found is you have to spend time up there, you have to understand the nuances of everybody's problem. Right. And the people that we talk to, thankfully, are survivors, and they're grateful to be alive, but they still have massive needs. And so take a listen. Michelle says it perfectly here, sums up what I'm trying to say, I think.
It's hard, I've sent a lot of friends and family pictures and videos and stuff, and then have had some of them come out here, like my mom and my brother were just up here, and still just cannot even believe it, like compared to the pictures, like you can't put it in a picture, you can't put it in a video, unless you come and see it firsthand. Yeah, you can't describe it.
All right, so it takes seeing it firsthand,
yeah,
and also understanding how much these different governments have asked for, right? So we know the state of North Carolina has estimated the damages and the needs to around $60 billion. And we wanted to get an understanding of, well, how much has the state actually received from the federal government? And it's kind of hard to get an exact number because you have individual assistance going out from FEMA. You have money going directly from agencies that are helping people, and then you have money that's going through the state's administering it. And it's somewhere around like $4.7 billion.
Yeah.
The governor's requested about $19 billion. So do the math, almost $5 billion out of $19 billion that they've requested. Mm-hmm. And then there's another, $40 billion plus of need that will be helped by the insurance companies, but also the state's thrown some money in, $2.9 billion. And I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out there, but the bottom line is we're not even close to where the need is still today. We're almost a year out, and we still don't have the exact amount of money, not even close to it, that the federal government has given.
Right. Well, and let's, I was discussing with the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Boone, David Jackson, and he was really open about how having those individuals, especially FEMA, but other federal agencies on the ground, when they were on the ground, was so incredibly helpful, because these individuals, in Appalachia, they build a rapport with individuals it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's days, it's weeks, and so these individuals, right, who would come from around Boone to bring him their most, these documents that are so treasured in their hearts, that have some stuff that really opens up everything in their closet, right? They had to bring these documents to get individuals to have insurance claims, all of these things. So it was interesting to hear from him, obviously, the steps and the process by which they had to find these amounts of money. It wasn't just a buffet of grants where you just, okay, that looks good to me. He was telling me that they literally had to do the groundwork on the ground to ask the state office to see what they could apply for. There was no precedent for this, and I guess they were shocked by after Katrina, after some Milton, after all of these hurricanes that we've seen that have devastated certain areas, not necessarily the mountains, that there's been no precedent set in the federal government for step-by-step plans for this. And he thought it was a little bit crazy as well that FEMA kind of, in his eyes, was the agency that was the subject matter experts on everything instead of going to the subject matter experts, which they're not necessarily equipped to be. And they've said that before, right? So it's interesting because now I think he wants to spearhead this council of individuals from the area. They've already helped individuals that have been hurt by Chantal. So the Raleigh area, Durham, they've worked with those individuals already here's what we've done. Here are these steps. And I think it's fascinating to see that this region has already started that. And I think there's a office that's attached to the governor's office called NC Help or NC Works, and they've created this. And David was telling me that's been their lifeline. That's literally been right next to the governor's desk that they can call. So there's been interesting things that have been popped up, and obviously I'll have more for you as we go through this. But it's the similarities, because I'm hearing officials say the same things that actual residents are saying too.
Well, and here's the thing too, if I can point this out. We talked to different people up in Buncombe County, and in one case, we talked to a couple who moved here about a decade ago. They wanted to farm. They wanted to live off their homestead, essentially. Mm-hmm. And, this flood comes through, wipes away everything they put their money into, right? And they can get the maximum for their home repairs, which is somewhere around $40,000 plus. And she goes to me, that doesn't even cover appliances. Like, number one, I can't even do that. Yeah. Then you have like $3,000 for personal losses. And she started kind of getting in tears about the fact that if it weren't for volunteers, they would be in no position where they're at today. Yep. And no one is sitting there. Right? Yeah, the nonprofits, the volunteers from all over the country. And I think these people up there, that I talk to, they're not asking for like to sit back and let the help come in. They are putting the work in. They're working long days.
Right. They want to know where they can go to do the work.
Yes, they want to do the work.
Well, and that's the challenge. Is a lot of folks that I've heard on the ground, I'm sure you've heard this too, is how do they go about getting to that point, though? Because, again, there's a lot of money that needs to be on the ground. And there are so many businesses right now, David was telling me in general, that didn't necessarily take any money in the inception of Helene with all those packages, but now they are needing it because all of their stores are gone. So it's again, every individual's on a different situation and has a different story, but it seems to be. And then you've got to think about soil testing, streams and banks that have moved. You've got to, and there's a lack of civil engineering, which I'm about to report on as well. So you've got all these things that have really hampered the issues on the ground. Anyway, let's talk about the federal assistance in terms of the wildfires, because right after Helene, it seemed like we had the wildfires in California. All of America's gaze shifted on that. And that's been one thing as well that I think folks have pointed out. Like, have people forgot about us here in Western North Carolina? What did folks say about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, too, this happened in January, these wildfires.
Right.
And, Governor Newsom and President Trump were kind of going at it a little bit, which kind of, here people are like, well, what about us? What about us? Right. And so that was a big part of what our project we were trying to accomplish. Has it been a similar response? We're going to put our full story on tonight at 11 o'clock. But the truth is that the majority of the money requested by both of these states, California and North Carolina, is just not here.
Yeah.
It's taking much longer than people would like it to. Yeah. And I know here in North Carolina, they're working with their congressional delegation to get things moved along. But $6 billion, out of California's money they've received. And this is going to funnel through some, federal governments. The governor there asked for an extra $40 billion, so almost twice as much as North Carolina asked for.
Okay.
And they've received $6 billion, which of course is more than we've received. But
Right.
when you look at percentages, it's actually less.
Yeah.
So I think that FEMA has made it clear from the start we have enough money to go around. At least we have the resources to work on multiple disasters at the same time, and then more disasters continue to happen. We know
Yeah.
about Texas as well. So I think that this is a good opportunity for people in this state, whether you live in Western North Carolina or not, to contact your member of Congress.
Yep.
No matter what side of the aisle you are on, this is a bipartisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to recover. We those of us that really work hard for a living, we can put ourselves in their position.
Yeah.
They work really hard to build what they have. They have a lot of treasures passed down over generations,
Right.
including their land,
Right.
all of which is destroyed, and they are begging for some assistance. And I think this is a good opportunity for people to say, hey, I'm going to call or email my member of Congress and just say, where did the funding efforts stand with this?
Mm-hmm.
Because we need more money. You can do that with your state lawmakers too, but in reality, the state's given almost as much as the federal government has at this point. That's wild to think. And I think too, no one is saying that these nonprofits haven't made a big difference too. This is in addition to that. And we were up there talking to Michelle, who you heard from, and we were talking about the bridge, you and I, Colin, too. They did get money from FEMA, something like $11,000 to $12,000 per household to pool money together to fix their bridge. They also need a good-sized donation to finish this bridge, and the creek is much larger than it used to be. The bridge construction hasn't even started. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, they got the rest of the bridge out of the creek. Think about how long that's taken,
Right.
and how much debris is taken. The other family we talked about, they had like 100 trees that were down from this. There was a landslide, a mountainside kind of came through their properties. And so I just think that it's a good reminder for folks to say to their member of Congress in Washington, D.C., hey, we still have needs here in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Where does that stand? And I want to point this out too, Colin. It is unclear how much money North Carolina is going to get. There's
Right.
no guarantee they're going to get what they asked for.
Yeah.
In fact, it seems unlikely that they will get that full amount.
Right.
And that is just a fraction of how much is needed.
Well, and that's what I asked David about as well, is why does it take so long? Why? And he said to me in no uncertain terms, it's not an electronic system where you're signing documents and they're into a system and people are scanning it. It's signing. The offices could be right next to each other, but the Department of Labor is working off the Department of Commerce. Every single thing that these individuals do in terms of this money that comes from the state, from the federal government as well, affects every single department. So it's not as simple as just drawing the funds and dispersing them, right? You have to sign a paper, then that paper goes to the next department, then that paper. And he said, and I asked him, why isn't this electronic? Why isn't this precedent set when we've seen other emergencies? Again, to my mind, I go back to Katrina because my family was impacted by that. But again, FEMA isn't an agency, as we saw, that comes in immediately and helps individuals, right? A lot of that, it looks like, is on the local governments. Whether or not they can handle that is not a debate right now for us, but that's the way it is, and that's the way Helene was in certain places. So I know that there is help coming, but there's a lot of help needed. And like I said, again, construction hasn't even started. Civil engineers, speaking specifically in Ashe County, I was up there doing a story with Lansing's Bridge to Recovery. They're a nonprofit group. They have specifically only been run on nonprofit donations, philanthropic people that have said, listen, I want to do this. That's how they're building bridges around Ashe County right now. They're not waiting on federal funds because they don't have them. And so the biggest thing that they've been doing now is reach out to UNC Charlotte. They have engineering students that are helping to build using certain materials to build bridges because cement is such at a demand right now. So there are so many issues that I think just scratch the surface of this that we really have not learned from. And I guess a lot of questions from Western North Carolina are why and when, right? So yeah, I guess a lot of discussions have to be had. And that was one thing he had to say is a lot of people have to get in the same room, emergency management officials, county management, state, and they have to ask some really hard questions in terms of how did we assess our response and really what is needed after this, right? So yeah, I don't think any one person has those answers, but
Well,
it is
look back to
interesting.
the pandemic. I mean, that was unprecedented at that time.
Right.
Just the pandemic, right?
People were just recovering.
And we kind of open the government's pocketbooks,
Right.
and it's open for widespread fraud, which we have seen. And so
Yep.
there are a lot of checks and balances in place. There's a lot of red tape, and that's a problem, especially when people need help.
Yeah.
Like a year ago,
Right.
essentially. And I think that's the real challenge for people. They almost feel like they've been screaming for the help, and at times not everyone hears them. And Michelle told me you kind of have to be the squeaky wheel. You like for these government leaders. They are these people's voice. We are their voice. And
Right.
their gratitude, I don't know if you experienced this, Con, but when I was up there, their gratitude of us coming up there and not forgetting them,
Yeah.
that was explicitly told to me. Thank you for remembering us.
Yeah. I mean,
Because-
it's good to hear.
I mean, the geography makes them
Right.
feel remote to begin with.
Right.
Then the communication issues up there make
Yeah.
it difficult.
Yeah.
And then the lack of funding makes it difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke to something, and I escaped my mind because I'm getting old. But but there was something about the funding. But yes, it is so interesting to hear these stories. So again, I think a lot has been said, and it sounds like there will be more political individuals in the area as we get closer to the anniversary to look at things. But again, I guess it just strikes me, and when you saw, I think I saw a picture from, what was the city that's close to us? Not Flat Rock,
Blowing
Chimney
Rock?
Rock.
Oh,
Chimney Rock. So there was a picture aerially that he was showing me, David, was of just the landscape and the stream, the bed that you can still see was washed, whether that it has mud. So there's a lot to be done, and I'm not exactly sure, right? And I think they are as well, right? When is all that stuff going to be gone? I mean, in Buncombe County alone, I travel to Asheville pretty regularly. There's a lot still to be done in terms of debris removal.
Well, and also you mentioned these creeks here. This is something I never thought about. What about like the native plant life? Like that's obviously
Right.
farther down on the list of.
Some ecologist has to come in, look at that. They have to test the soil. And that's another thing that Lansing's Bush Recovery was telling me is they added people on their board strategically so that they could, I guess circumvent the process. It's an illegal way, but they're having individuals that are certified, that understand the process to get these jobs and projects done quicker. I think that's something to me that's amazing, that individuals are working together to get this done. But yes, there's so much to think about. And then another last thing here is a lot of these county governments are fronting the money for this. So there's a lot of municipalities that aren't solvent right now. And that's what David was, I guess, the worrisome now is going into 2026. You have another election, right, based on this. He is worrying that a lot of these municipalities who have fronted this money, whether it's debris removal, whether it's giving SBA loans, that they're not going to be getting this money in time for them to need to get the money to help the individuals. So there are a lot of questions I think that need to be answered, and I don't know if those answers are going to be coming anytime soon.
Well, and then you mentioned Hurricane Katrina. Like we can all remember that administration's response and how it felt like forever for those
Right.
people to get the help they needed.
I mean, he flew over the city, and I remember that, right? And it's noted in documentaries. And even former President Bush says, maybe it's something I should have thought more about. I don't think anyone could have fathomed how bad it was, and unless you were there, same thing as Helene, unless you've been there, as you've said, and as Michelle pointed out, you don't know the full devastation, the grasp. We were in Valley Crucis. There's a store there, Mass General store. They had 4 to 5 feet of water. It got into the store, and it literally moved a church there that's been there since the 1850s. So I mean, it's tough to put in words unless you saw it. I mean, even driving along I-40 now, it's still just my jaw drops to see the cavern that was created by water. I mean, there's nothing more powerful, in my opinion, other than fire, maybe. Water is just something that's a destructive force, and you can't get around it. So
well, we went up to in Old Fort. We went to a FEMA trailer park there.
Yeah.
You remember we've reported in the past about FEMA trailers, and we're still working on some additional reporting on that. But talked to a man who was, living in a campground temporarily. He'd gone through a divorce.
Right.
He was living in a camper, and thank goodness he left. He showed me a picture of the camper after the fact. He would have been dead.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. But in the meantime, he's living in a FEMA trailer.
Right.
And he's got to figure out that's only a temporary solution.
Right.
Right. Thank goodness there's a safety net
Yeah.
there. But now what? Now what do I do?
Well, speaking of, somebody said to me, I remember from Katrina, people were still living in FEMA trailers 10 years later. And actually, people are still living in FEMA trailers to this day.
And if you
it's
look
been
at
20
other
years.
parts of North Carolina, after past storms,
Right.
trying to rebuild homes has taken forever. And there's been a lot of issues with the bureaucracy here in North Carolina relating to rebuild NC. So the track record isn't great.
Right.
in
This isn't the
responding.
dump on the federal government.
Not
It's
at all.
just
Or the state.
Right. It's just looking at, as you say, the track record. And again, individuals are just worried about what they see. There seems to be, in David's words, no urgency. And that's one thing that folks have continued to say to me is no urgency. And people's lives are at stake here, right?
Call your lawmaker. That's what I say all the time.
That's the biggest
Let
thing.
them know that. And you know what? Speak up for the people that are in Western North Carolina if you don't live there.
Yeah.
I've talked to so many people who live around here that go up there and help them. And they're helping them, right? So it's on everyone to say, hey, the need is still there.
Well, let's not forget, Appalachia was cut off from the world for weeks. They had no self-service. There was no email. So again, there was a lot of Western North Carolina that didn't necessarily have a way to communicate with the outside world in getting that help immediately, right? And some individuals are still trying to get, I guess, stable environment in terms of communication. So it's interesting where this goes. So,
and I also wonder too, Colin. I mean, like here in Charlotte, like Riverside Drive, Mountain Island Lake, that area got flooded bad, but we're in a city that overall wasn't devastated.
Right.
A portion had some really bad damage.
right.
Devastation. There was a death here, but it wasn't a remote section.
We didn't get a
with-
federal declaration.
Right, widespread. There was portions of federal declaration, but
Right.
wasn't widespread.
Right.
And so those people, there was the county here, I thought moved fairly quickly in trying to figure out, okay, are we going to try to buy some more property to clear up the flooding there?
Yeah.
You've got people that live all over the place in remote sections that are already cut off from the rest of us. And it's really difficult, I think, to get the message across.
Yeah.
And, especially after the storm happens 6 months later, thankfully we're all up there a lot lately, you have to continue showing the progress and what's inhibiting the progress so the rest of the world can see it. Because, there's so many other national problems and disasters that are all equally terrible, and everybody needs to kind of get out there, bullhorn and say, hey, we need the help too. Don't forget about us. Because, again, most of the money requested has not been received.
Yeah, and as we said, there's a lot of people that need it. A lot of businesses, I think, that are going to actually need some type of assistance at some point. And I did want to point out, we think about the pandemic being so long ago, but in David's words, a lot of those restaurants, those small businesses in and around Western North Carolina were just getting back on their feet. And honestly, they were just using some of the COVID funds that they had been allotted. So then you think about, you take away 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 biggest months for them with literally no way to make that money. I don't know how you recover from that, right?
Right now, too, you have to think about this is going to be peak fall season,
exactly.
right, coming up here.
Right.
So hopefully,
and they missed out on this last year.
They missed the whole season,
and that's their biggest year.
Yeah.
So the apple picking. There weren't no apples to pick last year. Christmas trees, right? People love to get Christmas trees. So it'll be interesting. Was there anything else that I think I don't want to draw this conversation up? I think we've had some good things that have been pointed out here.
Well, I want to point out that this couple that we interviewed, Jennifer B. Tesh and her husband Joe, basically told me that this was the same response to them through multiple administrations. They said it felt the same through the Biden administration and through the Trump administration. And I think that goes to show
that's a good bar to know,
bureaucracy
right?
issue here at play, which always is an issue when you have government.
Yep.
And it's just a reminder that there's a disconnect between the person on the ground and the person that is in Congress, that is in the White House, et cetera. There's a lot of space between those two extremes.
Yeah.
And so I think we got to find a way to get closer to the middle to make sure that there's the communication to keep it going all the way through, because that's really where it gets held up. And even the money that has been approved for North Carolina, it still has to go through additional checks and balances here in the state before it can be passed on down. So it's never going to be fast enough. And this is unprecedented, so you have to give a little bit of grace for that.
Right.
But at the same time, we expect our neighbors to be taken care of in their darkest moments.
Yeah.
And these people have remarkable stories just surviving. I mean, I interviewed these sisters, I don't know if you got to see the story, I think you did, that rode a mattress
Yes.
down a creek to survive in their 70s.
Yeah.
And they were down the creek for 2 days before
Right.
they were found. I mean, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And they deserve a chance to recover. I was in
Right.
their trailer now that they built out of a shed. Like volunteers helped build a shed that they're living in that looks just like a home.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it until you walk in and you look up the ceiling to see it's actually a shed. I mean, amazing. Thankfully, they're housed. But all these GoFundMes that you see out there, the need is just extreme.
Right.
You can find it if you want to search for it.
Yeah. And again, the local municipalities, they're thinking about the future because this could happen again. That's why I think there's such an urgency to have these conversations with everybody getting in the same room to discuss what that response looked like and then what other regions of North Carolina can help. Because, like as I said, David said he wants to go to Florida to learn more about what they can do, right, to do better here in North Carolina in terms of response.
What about Tennessee, just over the mountain?
That too. And actually, they're working with individuals that are right there too. So it's very interesting. I mean, the economies work hand in hand. And really, it is interesting to see the plans because, as I said, they are now realizing at these local municipality levels that local government is really the first response in some ways. So to not have those civil engineers, to not have some of those professions that first responders, right? To not have those people to backfill and to really get the emergency response going. They've got to create more education around it. So I think some good conversations will be had.
You got to learn from everything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. All right, Nate, appreciate your story. It'll be on tonight at
11.
All right, 11 o'clock tonight, guys. Stick around for that. Appreciate your time, my friend.